Hi, this is Alessio. Hope you're well. In this video, I'm going to try my best to answer a question which I'm sure you're probably wondering too, which is when is the Federal Reserve likely to make a rate cut? When is the Fed likely to make a cut in interest rates? And I'm going to show you these charts you're seeing here as to which month of the year, this year in 2024, is it more likely for a rate cut, and what do traders think? And in case you're wondering why does it matter when the Federal Reserve is going to make a rate cut? Well, as I'm sure you know, in my previous video I explained that when the Federal Reserve at some point this year makes a rate cut, that should put us on alert about the stock markets, because what the Federal Reserve does could be an important clue as to what may happen on the major stock markets. All right, guys, join me. Hey guys, welcome back. As you can probably see, I'm not in London. I'm actually in a beautiful spot here in England called Forest Mere. And I thought I'd just come out here and make a quick video for you about the major markets and also the Federal Reserve decision to make rate cuts. Now, in a previous video, you may remember, and by the way, if you haven't seen that video, go ahead and watch it because I explained why the Federal Reserve decision to make a rate cut, a cut in interest rates, could be an important clue as to what may happen to the major stock markets. I'll put the link to that video in the description so you can go ahead and watch it. I won't go into any detail about it. But the question you're probably wondering, and I'm sure a lot of people are asking, is when is the Federal Reserve likely to make a rate cut, a cut in interest rates this year in 2024? There's a lot of speculation that the rate cut could happen in March. Some people are saying the Fed could cut rates perhaps in the summer of this year. And some people are thinking, no, it won't happen until probably December, late December of this year. So the Fed does not appear political. Now, here's something you may find fascinating. There is actually a more objective way of finding out when the Federal Reserve is likely to make a rate cut. And that is shown to you by these charts that I'm going to show you in this video. By the way, the link to find these charts, I'll put it for you in the description. These charts are provided by the CME website. So what these charts are showing to you are the target rate probabilities for specific months of the year. So in other words, which month of the year, this year in 2024, is more likely for the Federal Reserve to make a rate cut. And traders essentially are placing their bets on which month of the year is more likely. So essentially, which month of the year, this year in 2024, is more likely for the Federal Reserve to make a rate cut? Now, the current target rate, as I'm making this video, is in the 525 to 550 range for interest rates. Now, if we click on the target rate probabilities for March of this year, we can see that there's an 84% expectation that the Fed will keep rates as they are, unchanged, in March. We can see that 84% of traders believe that they'll keep rates unchanged in the 525 to 550 target rate. So again, there's an 84% expectation that rates will remain unchanged in March of this year. In other words, the Fed will continue to pause rates and keep them unchanged. Now, if we go into the month of June, just a few months after that, we can see there's almost a 42% expectation of a rate cut to the 500 to 525 range. There's also 43% expectation of a rate cut to the 475, 500 range. So in other words, quite a lot of traders believe there may be a rate cut sometime in the summer of this year, in June. And actually, if we look at the July month, in July, we can see a 42% expectation of a rate cut to the 475, 500 range. So again, a very high expectation of a rate cut for the summer of this year between June and July. Probably July seems to be more likely based on the data we're seeing here. Again, a 42% expectation of a rate cut this summer by the end of July. And what about September? We can see the target rate probabilities for a rate cut in September is about 41%. So again, a very high expectation of a rate cut perhaps in September of this year. And by the way, when you think about that, September is only about a couple of months away from the general election in the US. Now, my friend Zach Meir believes that the Federal Reserve is unlikely to make a rate cut before the general election in the US. He thinks that if the Federal Reserve makes a rate cut before the election, that could be viewed as political by some. So that's a good point, in which case that would mean that the Federal Reserve could potentially make a rate cut in December, after the general election. Now, if we look at the month of December, we can see there's about a 32% expectation of a rate cut to the 400 to 425 range. So there seems to be about a 30% or so expectation of a rate cut in the month of December. However, I should say, based on the data we can see here from these CME charts, it seems the majority of traders seem to expect a rate cut in the summer of this year, probably in June or July. I don't know what to make of that. They could be right, but they could also be wrong. Again, my friend Zach believes that the Federal Reserve is unlikely to make a rate cut before the election because it could be viewed as political. Perhaps you might agree with that. However, if that view is wrong, and if we go with this data we're seeing here on these charts, then these charts indicate there could be a higher probability of a rate cut sometime in the summer of this year, probably by the end of June or July of this year. So perhaps they're right. And in case you're wondering, why does any of this matter? What does it matter when the Federal Reserve could make a rate cut or not? Well, I explained to you in my previous video. If you haven't seen it already, go ahead and watch that. Because based on historical statistics, whenever the Federal Reserve has gone from increasing rates to cutting rates, that has been a major warning sign for the stock market. In other words, the decision of the Federal Reserve to cut rates is used as a statistical tool by which we can measure when we could be reaching a major top in the markets and when this could spell trouble for the market. Because as you can see from this chart, which I showed you in my previous video, whenever the Federal Reserve in the past has gone from increasing rates to cutting rates, for example, the year 2000, 2007, and also in the 70s, this has been the first warning sign for the major stock market that we could be approaching a major top and a likely reversal in the markets. Let me just say two things about this because some people may misunderstand what I'm saying here. First of all, the action of the Federal Reserve to cut rates does not by itself cause the market to make a top and then reverse. In other words, we're not saying that the action of the Federal Reserve to cut rates, that causes the market to make a top and then drop and collapse. That is not at all what we're saying. No, all we're saying is we're using the action of the Federal Reserve to cut rates as an important clue, as a statistical clue based on historical patterns. It's one of the major warning signs or alerts we pay attention to. The second thing I want to mention is this. As I'm making this video right now, there is as yet no sign of a top in the stock market. So I'm not saying the stock market has topped already. For now, bulls are still in control as long as we stay above support. However, it's only if the stock market were to break down below support, below key support levels, then we can say potentially we've reached a top in the market. But for now, as I'm making this video, there's no sign of a top in the market. And we still remain in an uptrend and bull market. So it's only if the market were to break down below support, whether before or after the Federal Reserve decision to cut rates, then it potentially becomes a bigger warning sign for the stock market. That likely we could be reaching a top. But for now, as long as we stay above support, there is no sign of that as yet. We may see a pullback in the market. In fact, I think a pullback or a correction in the stock market after the strong rally we've seen here so far, I think that's quite likely. So we may see a pullback or a correction. However, guys, keep your eyes on these charts and the likely target rate probabilities and the expectations of traders as to when we could see a rate cut. This should be interesting. Let's see if the Federal Reserve makes a rate cut in June or July or perhaps in December. It seems the majority of traders are expecting a rate cut by the end of June or July. That seems to be more likely. And if that happens and when that happens, then that could be a first warning sign for the major stock markets. Should be quite interesting. All right, guys, let me know what you think. Which month do you think the Federal Reserve could make a rate cut? And also, guys, watch our members video for much more details about Elliott wave counts as well. Thank you very much indeed. I'll see you guys in the next video update. Bye for now.